You doing all right? Good. That was great. That song, as I was going through this message, it was like, man, that is such a perfect song. And as you'll hear it again after the message, hopefully you can kind of process that song through what we're going to talk about today. So I don't usually, I always have a title for sermons, but I never really tell anybody what they are. I know they're just for my own kicks and giggles. But so this one could have had a couple different titles, and that's why I wanted to share it to you. But I'm calling it Through the Gatekeepers, but it could have been called Girl Power. So I think, and I wanted to contact a lot of my female pastoral colleagues and go, have you read this like this before? Because it's an incredible testimony of the power of a woman who's being kept at bay. So what we're doing is we're picking up in Matthew chapter 15, and we're going to start in verse 21, and we're going to make it through 4 words. All right? It says, Jesus left that place. Jesus left that place. So one of the things that I wanted to kind of remind us about the way that we're doing this Matthew series, or we have been doing this Matthew series, is that you get to see the way all the stories connect to one another. And you get to kind of see the big picture of what Matthew is trying to do with this text that he's writing to his congregation. And so with that comes so if you have a Bible, I don't know which Bibles you have at home, but a lot of your Bibles have like headings and chapters, right? And it'll kind of tell you, this is where you start reading this story. Well, those are made up, right? Those are made up by the Bible, by whoever produces individual Bibles, and depending on what Bible you have, it'll say the story is a different title and in a different place. And so if you and so these stories, when Matthew says something like Jesus left that place, it's kind of like, I don't know, we haven't done this in forever, but remember it says, what do you do when you find the word therefore? You ask, what is it there for? Right? That's Bible study 101, all right? Anytime you see the word therefore, you go, what is it there for? And so the same thing with this phrasing, Jesus left that place. It's like, well, what was that place? And so Pastor Laura set us up kind of with last week's message, that the location, it's less about the location Jesus left than it is the circumstance that Jesus left. Because Matthew doesn't give us like a location of where they left from. He just says that he left that place. And so last week, Pastor Laura took us through a situation leading up that kind of started in the beginning of 15. And Jesus began dismantling their systems. You remember this? It was this whole conversation about clean and unclean, and what makes you clean. Is it the things you do? Is it the things you eat? And if you're unclean, you're out. If you're clean, you're allowed in, right? And there's all this back and forth about who's in, who's out. And Jesus kind of gets to the end, and he says, it's really about the heart. That it's the heart and what comes out of the heart that shows us what's in the heart. And oftentimes what comes out of our mouth shows us who we really are. But if the heart isn't in good condition, no amount of rule following helps that. And so by the end of the conversation, you kind of have these 2 groups that were there. You had the disciples, and you had some Pharisees, and likely a crowd. And by the end of that conversation where Pastor Laura left off, you basically had Pharisees that were offended, right? That's verse 12 if you're following along, 15:12. It says, then the disciples approached and said to him, do you know that the Pharisees took offense when they heard what you said? Right, so you have upset Pharisees that Jesus walked away from, and then you also have confused disciples, which is a common thread in their ministry, right? Verse 16, it says, then he, Jesus, said, are you also still without understanding? Do you not see? Right? So these are the 2 groups, and so this is the situation that Jesus is walking out of. And so just to make sure that this section makes sense, so everything makes sense is from here, Jesus is letting them know that people don't get to make up rules that keep people out or let certain people in. Like, that's what Jesus is saying. We don't get to do that. Ironically, right, and I think this is why Matthew is writing this, is that we still have a tendency to do that. Anybody? Yeah, we tend to be gatekeepers. Like, it's an easy thing to fall into, gatekeeping. It's like, no, you're not. You're going to mess this up. You know, you're not going to fit in. You're not even going to like it. Like we just kind of have these gates that we put up. And so now the story continues. We can read the rest of verse 21. Jesus left that place and went away to the district of Tyre and Sidon. So Jesus goes from a situation where people don't get it and kind of want to keep the rules to a place called Tyre and Sidon. And so the reason Matthew names these cities, and it's important, because he didn't name where they came from, but he did name where he was going, that these are historical enemies of Israel. Tyre and Sidon. Right? If you go back to the Old Testament, I'm not going to do it, but you can find where these cities are named and it's an issue, and they are enemies of Israel. And so what's happening, right? Jesus is moving from home base, where no one understands, and no one gets it, no one likes him, or a lot of people don't like him, and to a place where cleanliness laws and all those things didn't even matter, right? There was nothing clean here in Jewish culture. The Jews would never go here, right? This is not a place they would go. They have different gods and culture, and if you're keeping people out, listen, if you're going to keep anybody out, these are the people, the Pharisees and the disciples would probably say, yeah, that makes sense. They probably shouldn't be a part of this. They're ancient enemies. So verse 22. Just then, a Canaanite woman from that region came out and started shouting, "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." So this is not a neutral description of this woman, right? There's actually a lot. Entering into this space, there's like 3 strikes already against her, right? First off, in that time, a female would not run up on a male teacher, and definitely would not be shouting at him, right? Like you would have been strike 1. The disciples would have rounded up, make sure protect them, right? Number 2, she's from the area of Tyre and Sidon. She's from a place of natural enemies. And then third, and this is interesting, because Matthew never uses this word again, and he hasn't used it yet, but he used it to describe this woman. He calls her a Canaanite, and you don't see it anywhere else. And that's a choice, because usually he'll use the word Gentile. We see the word Samaritan pop up, right? But Canaanite, in R.T. France, a theologian, he said it like this. He said, the term is deliberately archaic, evoking Israel's historic enemies. So Matthew really wants us to feel this tension of the space and the person that is in front of them. Right? This isn't just an outsider. Like, she's literally the kind of person that they would have been raised to not like. And that's heavy. So we have the discussion from last week about cleanliness and rules. And so there's a lot of tension still playing in this thing. So we have this woman, right? But in a place, and this is what's so crazy, and this is, the gospel is so good. In a place defined as unclean from a woman identified as the enemy, right? An unclean enemy, she calls Jesus Lord and Son of David, right? So the things the religious leaders were rejecting, and the thing that the disciples were like, I don't get it. This woman goes, I get it. I know who he is. I know exactly who he is. And she calls him by name, Son of Jesus, Lord, Son of David. And you have to think Jesus is going to be excited about this, right? If you're not reading ahead. You got to go, right? It's like, I just left this nightmare, and then, I'm here in the enemy territory, and there's this woman who's just like, she knows it, she gets it, right? Jesus has to be excited about this. Verse 23. But he did not answer her at all. Like, at all. Right? Matthew could have said he did not answer her. He added, at all. And so here's another reason why reading through Matthew this way is very helpful, because we've already encountered a demoniac. Remember, it was 15 months ago, right? Matthew 8. We can start over if we have to. But remember, Jesus goes on a boat and crosses the sea into enemy territory, and there's a demoniac, a man possessed by a demon, that comes up to him, and Jesus just heals him. right? And so there's something going on in this story that's different from the other story, and it's, Jesus, what are you doing here? And so the silence here, I believe, is on purpose, right? I mean, anything Jesus does is on purpose. But what is the purpose of the silence? And so it says this, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, send her away, for she keeps shouting at us. And I think this is the reason for the silence. I think, and it's not to ignore the woman. Track with me here, right? But do you see how the disciples act? And we already know the woman gets it, right? She gets it, but do the disciples? And so the question Jesus is silently asking is, how do kingdom people treat those they've already decided that don't belong? How are kingdom people, Christians, people, right, in the kingdom of God, how will we treat people that we've already decided, or our cultures have already decided, should not be here? The person whose beliefs frustrate you, the person whose politics frustrate you, the person you rather avoid than engage. And if you really want to feel this, if you're older than 30 years old, remember how Muslims were treated after 9/11, right? And so Jesus is putting this out there. He goes, hey, your culture kind of says this is how this functions, and I think obviously the disciples fail the test. Right, they just get her out of here. Just come on, Jesus, do something. We're doing stuff. We got stuff to do, places to go, right? We got a nation to set free and all this stuff. And so I think they fail. And can I say something? Can we say something out loud that we don't like to admit? We all have prejudices that are deep inside of us, that were instilled by our contexts. Does that track? Right? There's just some things, there's some embedded theology, you can call it that. There's some things that are embedded in us from our context that will only be removed through confrontation. And so I think that's what's happening here. He's like, these things aren't good, right? But they're a reality for those. And so the prejudice don't go away without confrontation, and that's why what we're experiencing in this story so far. That after leaving the last scene, Jesus goes, let me show you your hearts. Because now we see the hearts. And we saw the words that came out of those hearts, right? It was, Jesus, get her out of here. And you see how the stories connect, right? It's Jesus is showing us exactly what it looks like when we're unclean. And then Jesus says this after, verse 24. He answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But she came and knelt before him. Now, when I'm kind of going through these passages, one of my temptations is to try to save Jesus. Do you know what I mean? Where I go, Jesus, I don't love that you just said this. Right? It's like, and so it's like so easy to kind of go, I'm going to try to soften it. It's like, no, the tension is on purpose, right? So we're not going to run from this tension, but we have to sit in it to find out what it means. And so it's more my job, I guess, to make it clear, not easy. Does that track? Okay. Now, but here's something important to notice. If you see kind of the way it's played out, so the woman approaches screaming, yelling, right? And then the disciples speak to Jesus, like, hey, Jesus, do something about this. And then Jesus responds with that. So Jesus, in this moment, I see, as far as I can tell, is talking to his disciples, not to the woman, right? Because she comes up after that. It's the disciples that talk to Jesus. Jesus responds to them by going, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. And then the woman hears that, and she approaches. Okay? But why are you saying that? Like, what does that mean? And have you ever said something out loud and then realized, oh, I don't think I believe that. Like sometimes we have some embedded things in us, and it's like, and I'll even do this in debate. Like if I'm debating somebody, I'll be like, I'm about to say something I don't think I've actually said, so I'm holding it loosely, right? And I might not even agree with what I'm about to say, but I just want you to know I'm going to say it, and then we can kind of work that out. Like sometimes you say things so that you can work them out. Like I'm a verbal processor, right? And so what I think happens I think Jesus is trying to bring to light this framework by saying it out loud so that everyone else could hear it. Because what Jesus says sounds exactly like the framework that they've been raised in, right? And so instead of correcting it immediately, he says it out loud, almost like to bring it into the open, as if to say, this is what you believe, right? Isn't this what you believe? That I'm just here for us and no one else? And then in verse 25, it says, but she came and knelt before him, saying, Lord, help me. Have you ever, her desperation, have you ever been there? I've been in that moment, right? Where it goes, I feel like I'm being stopped from getting to Jesus. Like I feel like there's some kind of barrier, and you just kind of go, and like this woman, she understands. Like this is the thing. This isn't a new thing. This isn't a crazy thing for Jesus to say in this culture. Like she wouldn't even be shocked. She'd be upset maybe. She wouldn't be shocked. Like you can even go to the woman at the well, right? The Samaritan woman at the well. She understands the cultural, like she's like, aren't you, remember, I don't know you don't know the story. She tells Jesus, like, you know you're not supposed to talk to me, right? You know we're not supposed to be doing this, right? And so there is this underlying tension between different cultures and religions in this time. And so we've been there, but she gets down to the simplest form of prayer. The very simplest form of prayer is just, God help me. Because sometimes we don't even know how we need help, right? Like sometimes I pray for things and God's going, you don't want me to give you that, you know, right? It's like there's something going on there. And so her desperation pushes her through the gatekeepers. And so it's like even her, like she would understand, like I know I'm not like following all your guys' rules. Like I know you got 300,000 of them, and there's all this stuff, and we can't get to the temple. And she's like, but just help me. And nothing could stop her from getting through those disciples to get to Jesus. Her persistent faith got her through the gatekeepers. In the church, I said this before, the church can be just as guilty of this as the disciples were. The religious systems that we're trying to exploit. And that we can do this thing. And so you don't get to decide. Again, you do not get to decide who is in and who is out, because it's not your kingdom. You're door holders. We're door holders, not gatekeepers, right? We're opening doors, not keeping them shut. And so if you think it's going to get easier, Jesus levels up in this conversation. In verse 26, he answered, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Jesus, what are you doing? Like you're like serious, like don't miss this, because Jesus is still, I think he's still pressing on this framework, right? I think he wants to get something either from the disciples or from her. He's trying to expose this, and so again, he's not saying anything shocking to them. And honestly, the disciples are probably like, finally, Jesus gets it, right? Like they're like, yes, Jesus, he's coming along, right? And so they're used to feeling, the women and the other religions, and they're used to feeling on the outside. And so while this framing Jesus is pushing on her hurt, again, it's not new. It's not new. She is averse in this framework. And at this moment, I don't know how I would respond if I'm her. I don't know if I would want to have words with Jesus, right? Like, or if I would just walk away. Like, I don't know if I don't know how I would do that, but I think that's why her story is in here and not mine. right? Right, because she doesn't walk away. She persists, and she does, the next thing that she does is extraordinary, because everyone else that does this to Jesus fails miserably. When they confront his words, when they talk back, they always bomb. And she says in verse 27, she said, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." I don't know if I'd have that in me. But if you look through history, a lot of times it's the people that can find their way into these systems. They acknowledge that they exist, but they don't avoid them, and that's what she does, right? She doesn't avoid them, she accepts it, but just enough to be able to shift it, right? She can get in there just enough to shift it. And so, and this is a huge concept for those of us that find ourselves, or for those of you that find yourselves pushing up against systems that want to keep you down, that don't want to let you be who you've been called to be, right? She doesn't deny that the framework exists, and she doesn't pretend that it's fair. She works inside of it. And it takes a special human, in my mind, to stand at the bottom of a social structure and still choose to squeeze your way in instead of just bailing on it. And so this is why Jesus responds the way he's about to respond. This woman is persistent with Jesus. She pushes her way into a system that wants to reject her, and so Jesus says this, verse 28. Then Jesus answered her, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter was healed from that moment. And so for me, that makes it very clear that this story was not about the woman, but about opening up this framing and putting it out there so you can see that it doesn't work, right? That Jesus is pressing on this exclusionary framework to provoke something from this woman or the disciples. Because in the previous story, you had a bunch of insiders arguing about what makes you clean and unclean, and who's in and out. And then Jesus goes to enemy territory and tells an outsider, "Great is your faith." And in fact, there's only two people that Jesus told that to in Matthew. This woman and the centurion. Outsiders. The only two people that Jesus says, "Great is your faith," are people that aren't supposed to understand it or get it. And so this is one of those sermons. I got to the end and I thought, I don't know that the application kind of stood out in this one. Like sometimes the application kind of flows from some of this. So I just want to kind of run through some things that we can take away from this story. Now, the first thing that she did, what made her faith so great? Like if we were to look at people if we're going to look at anybody and go, what are they doing? We should probably look at the people that Jesus said, "Great is your faith," right? And so what did she do that made her faith so great? And the first thing is this: she didn't walk away too early. She didn't walk away too early. She had every reason to. Many of us would have. Silence, resistance, people telling her to leave, like all that happening. Everything about this moment said, this isn't for you. And still she stayed. And I think a lot of us miss what God is doing in our lives because we leave too soon. We get frustrated too soon. We hit resistance, we feel distance, we don't get the response that we expected, and we assume that means no. But what if it doesn't? What if the invitation is to stay a little longer than you wanted to? To keep showing up even when it feels like the door is closed, because sometimes faith isn't getting an immediate answer, it's refusing to walk away when you don't. Let me say that again. Because sometimes faith isn't getting an immediate answer, it's refusing to walk away when you don't. And that's what this woman showed us. And then the second thing we see is this: she came with need, not performance. Right? At first she had kind of all the right language. Son of David, right? Lord. She's saying the right things, but when everything pushes back, all that falls away. No more trying to get it right, no more trying to prove something, just need. And I think a lot of us have been taught to approach God. I've been taught to approach God with performance. God, look at all the stuff I can do. You know, look how much I show up. Look how long I've been tithing. Look at all that. Like it's so. And then what the problem with that is that when you're not performing well, then you go, well, God must be mad at me then, right? And because we think that his relationship, I'm getting way off track. We think that our relationships, psychologically, a lot of times we tie it to our Father and then project it onto God the Father. And so sometimes you see those things, you go, God must not love me because I'm not doing well. Number 3, she believed in her heart that there was still room for her, even when people told her there wasn't. Even after everything that was said, after being placed on the outside, she still believed there was something in Jesus for her. And not because the system made space, right? She believed that there was something, that Jesus was more than what the system was telling her. And that can get you in a lot of trouble, but a lot of fun. like the system's telling you, no, that's not how Jesus works. No, that's not how Jesus works. And then you break through the barriers and you go, Jesus, just help me. She believed that Jesus is more than what the church was telling her. This isn't for you, and faith says, maybe not, but I'm not leaving because I believe there's still something here for me. And then the last one, the fourth thing we could take away. She didn't just stay in the space. She stayed in the conversation. She didn't shut down when things got hard. She didn't walk away. And when the response wasn't what she hoped for, she didn't take offense and leave. She just kept engaging Jesus. Listen, I'm telling you, this happens in Scripture and in prayer. If you want to know how do you engage Jesus, you have to read the words of Jesus and pray to Jesus, right? That's how. And so you've got to keep going back to it, even when it feels uncomfortable, even when you get to passages like this one where you go, what are you doing, Jesus? You have to stay in the tension. You have to stay in the conversation. You can't just move to the next chapter because it's too hard, right? Stay in it. When God feels silent, when the answers don't come, when the moment doesn't go the way we expected, it's just really easy to disengage. I guess this thing isn't for me. But faith doesn't disappear when the conversations get difficult. Faith stays. Faith keeps showing up. Faith keeps talking, even when it would be easier to walk away. God bless you, church.